8 millimeter from 1999. IMDb plot summary: a private investigator is hired to discover if a snuff film is authentic or not. Directed by Joel Schumacher, starring Nicolas Cage, Joaquin Phoenix, and James Gandolfini. So much like I said, like I almost put Walk the Line potentially as my first love because I really thought he impressed me in that film, and then also Gladiator, which we'll be talking about. Also, I thought that was a scene stealing performance there. But when I first think of Joaquin Phoenix and I first did have an impression on him, like I was saying in the intro, it was as a character actor who was Rivers' brother. And this movie, when I think
Hmm.
back on, okay, what was the first movie that I really remember being like interested in a Joaquin Phoenix performance and where I thought I don't want to say stole the movie, but it's definitely one of a good part in the film was
Hmm.
this movie 8 millimeter, which I saw, back when it came out, not in the theaters. I rented it on VHS, and this movie, Nicolas Cage stars in it. But I'll talk about the Joaquin stuff first, and then hear your thoughts, and we get more into the film. But Joaquin's character comes in maybe after the first act, and the second act of the movie is really becomes a two-hander between Nicolas Cage, who's again investigating this snuff film, which is a film which shows someone getting killed. Is it real or is it fake? And during his travels to try to figure this out, he runs into Joaquin Phoenix, who plays like a sex shop owner, basically, or worker at the sex shop. That then he goes on this adventure and they're doing this detective story together. And that's when the movie to me really does come alive. And Joaquin is playing this unconventional sort of weird, could be like a sleazy guy, but he rounds him out a little bit so that you sort of feel like he's I don't know, like not such a weird or awkward person. I mean, yeah, he works in a sex shop and he's dressed kind of like out of the British band The Prodigy or something, but there's something that like makes him feel like, oh, I actually want to learn more about this guy, and I want more of the movie to be Nicolas Cage and Joaquin Phoenix going on and doing these investigations. And spoiler alert, he doesn't end up living to the end of the movie. And when he gets
Hmm.
taken out of the film, the film I think really just stops kind of dead in its tracks. It's not a great film anyway, and again, I can talk more about my thoughts on the film, but that part of the movie was very engaging, and it was more so because of what Joaquin was bringing to this more offbeat, interesting kind of comedic performance in this role than what Nicolas Cage was doing or what the movie did overall. So this one was stood out in my mind as a early Joaquin film that I really thought he was the best part of, honestly, even though he's just sort of a character actor performance essentially. And but curious if you'd seen this before and what impression you had of Joaquin in 8 millimeter.
Yeah, I'd never seen this movie before, and it was fun. Well, it's not a fun movie, but it's interesting to kind of watch him younger like this. Like you said, he's awkward and maybe not in his best shape, which is sort of the character,
Hmm.
has like belly hanging out from like crop tops and what have you. And
Yeah.
and there's weirdness to it, like you mentioned, which is a theme that we'll see in Joaquin's entire career. But I think there's also sweetness to him in this character, which is also another theme that we see from him, where you're almost like, oh, are you innocent? Or maybe you're not the sharpest tool in the box, or what is going on with you? But at the same time, there's attraction or at least interest as an audience
Hmm.
that you want to learn more, like you were saying. Because, anybody who's playing something like that can be like, oh, maybe too flat or not as engaging. That's the word I was looking for. But there's
Hmm.
always something engaging with him, and that's true here too. The rest of the movie, I mean, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It's not a good movie, but yeah, he was probably the best part of it, and yeah, it was fun to watch him and kind of his earlier days. The other movie that I always think of him, which I didn't put as my first love, but it's the one with Nicole Kidman,
To
Exact to
die
Die
for.
For. Yeah, exactly. That's the one that I always think of from his younger days, which again, he's amazing in. But yeah, this is like a different register of off center, weird, but also kind of sweet. So yeah, it was fun to see him.
Yeah, I think the sweetness thing is important to this
Yeah.
movie. It's sort of like a levity, maybe too, in how
Yeah.
he's sort of a little silly, but feels authentic and not like a caricature of what this role could be in a movie
Mm.
that is very dire. But yeah, I don't like the film. I don't think it's very successful. And it's because it's almost trying to be too dire. It's like, oh, we're gonna make a really dark movie about underground sex rings and all this stuff and try to make it overly dour. And it just comes across as, I don't know, like kind of silly because of that. And
Yeah.
just like you're trying too hard. Like, okay, we get it. This is like some sort of secret underground sex ring or going to these crazy like S&M shows and things. It's like, okay, like this is not interesting. And maybe now this is kind of dated, and maybe at the time it was shocking in like 1999 to see this. I don't know. I just feel like this could be on a cable show now in terms of how they're handling this. It just feels very pedestrian almost.
Exactly. But it's weird. Like on one hand, yeah, trying to be too serious, but also to me, this felt like there's something off with the tone of the entire movie. Like Nicolas Cage feels like he's just doing a Nicolas Cage bit where it doesn't seem like he's serious about any of what's going on. The music choices are all over the map
Yeah.
in terms of like makes it sound like fun that, oh, we're going to go and investigate this thing. So on one hand, it's very serious. At the same time, it's not taking these terrible things that are happening very seriously. I was kind of bothered by that, to be honest, especially Nicolas Cage's performance and just the tone of the movie to the point that it becomes unrelenting. I will say that the first, I want to say, hour, though everything feels very staged, and Nick Cage, once again, like I said, like this is not a good performance, but the premise of it is interesting. Like you want to know what is going on and what would they really uncover and such. So I was intrigued in that, just having not read or known anything about the movie. But as it went down, it kind of became unrelenting. And especially to your earlier point, like Joaquin stepping in was definitely a breath of fresh air, which is not something I would normally say about a Joaquin performance typically,
Right.
because he always plays such like dour, crazy. In fact, he would be one of the people in those S&M shows, probably, doing
Right.
like really weird out there things. But instead, it's kind of nice to see him not do that. This was not a fun watch at all.
Yeah, I think the tone of it is kind of off too. When I was
Yeah.
watching this, is I felt like the lighting and the cinematography was almost like kind of too glossy and sheen, like too much sheen on it for what you would
Yeah.
expect from something like this. Which this movie was written by the guy who wrote Seven, the Fincher film from the mid
Mm-hmm.
'90s, and this is definitely during that age of sort of Seven knockoff movies, and this falls
Yeah.
into that category of, oh, how can we shock you and sort of make you look, look at this horrible thing that's happening. But I think handled in the right hands with Joel Schumacher. I mean, he's definitely no David
No.
Fincher. I mean, even Fincher sort of tried the similar thing with his adaptation of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I feel like is very similar, but the cinematography and the tone of that movie matched the dark tone of
Yeah.
what that film is. And this movie feels like the material. Maybe at the time they didn't want to make it so dark, so they put like a lighter kind of sheen on things and a little more glossier, and it makes it feel just like a normal kind of '90s blockbuster, even though it's about these like horrible things and showing horrible things. It's just some mismatch there. Then again, I think more on Joel Schumacher, and maybe the material was heard by the studio or something. Then even I do Nick Cage. I think actually this is a serviceable Nick Cage performance. I think I can't see really another actor doing what he was tasked to do within this movie and still kind of being interesting. But Joaquin, like you said, is the sweet spot in this movie, as a sweet, fun sex shop employee, I guess, in his crop tops. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.